So thank you so much, you three, for taking the time to be part of today's roundtable discussion, which is going to be the first in a series of monthly conversations. The idea for this series was sparked by what is happening in the world, to be quite honest, and also kind of in collaboration with the September 2020 issue on activism, something that is a massive part of my life and also a massive part of British Vogue's editor-in-chief, Edward Enninful. So today I will be exploring the topic of community with the incredible Munroe Bergdorf, Amika George, and also Agnes Mwakatuma, three brilliant leaders and inspiring advocates for their communities. We'll be discussing the changing nature of community against the backdrop of everything that's going on in this world, what it means to invest in marginalized populations, and the impact of current events on communities. But we can ask each other questions. We can just have, Munroe and Amika, you've been on the podcast, and Agnes, we're desperate to get Black Minds Matter on the podcast as well. So you know my vibe and how this is going to kind of roll. So my first question, and this is for all three of you, is what does community mean to you right now, and how has the idea evolved throughout your life? And either of you can go first.
Do you want me to go first? Should I go first?
Go first, Munroe.
So community to me is seeing myself reflected in, it can be online, or it can be in real life, or it can be even in the workplace, whether or not it's, having a Black union or a trans or LGBT union within the organization that you work for. So I think it's really a sounding board. It's a sense of belonging. Community takes so many different forms, but for me personally, it's just being able to look around me and see myself reflected in many different ways.
And have you always do you remember the first time you saw yourself reflected in a community that wasn't one that you were kind of thrust into and one that you decided to choose for yourself?
Yeah, I think it was definitely the first time that I went to Pride. Up until that point, I hadn't experienced being around queer people in a resistant way. Like when I say resistant, I mean part of a resistance, and Pride is really that moment that you get to, live outside of what's happening within society and just celebrate celebrate who you are and be part of the resistance. So I don't know, personally it was Pride, and that just kind of set the ball rolling to me exploring more about where I come from, more about my identity as a Black trans woman. Until I went to Pride, I didn't realize that it was a Black trans woman that kicked off the entire thing. Sparked the gay rights movement that led to the LGBT movement. So it really was my access to empowerment. It was my access to being able to understand myself and understand other people like me and feel proud of who I am rather than ashamed, especially as a marginalized person.
What about you, Agnes?
Community is something that I'm just learning now, and that's because I actually grew up in a predominantly white area. So community meant so many different things at that time. And it was only until I'd actually moved out of that place that I actually learned the true meaning of people really being a reflection of who you are, people having your back. It was only till, about 3 years ago that I actually had someone stand up for me, which was the most beautiful thing. And that's what really community means for me, someone actually being there to stand up for you during times where your voice is being oppressed.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, having also grown up in a predominantly white environment, it was, and I loved what you said, Munroe, about kind of this access to empowerment. That's what kind of community has given you. And I feel completely the same. It's been mad to think how lacking I was in that empowerment because of the way I was the way I had to mold myself amongst a community that I didn't really feel like I necessarily fit amongst.
Yeah.
And now that I do have my own community, it's very freeing and empowering that I'm able to like stand up for people that I like truly want to stand up for, but I also feel like they have my back in return. What about you, Amika?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think for me, growing up, I always felt like the word community in my mind was like always had to be physical. It had to be kind of the people that I surrounded myself with, whether that be my family or my friends or my school or whatever. And then growing up, I realized actually online spaces and kind of the solidarity that people showed with my campaign Free Periods, that was the first time I really felt like I had people who I couldn't see but who I knew were there, and there's that real sense of comfort and just knowing that people, like we've said, have your back, are willing to stand up for you. And it's also just very comforting to not always have to be arguing for your existence or like Munroe said, resisting something. It's really amazing to have people who are on your side and agree with you, and it's not going to be a battle to persuade them of something, because you share an identity and you share values and beliefs, and that can make your life a lot easier.
No, completely. And I feel like it's like an upwards kind of struggle in the sense that, you go through many different periods in your life and you are thrust into all different communities, not necessarily because you want to, whether it be through school or, the people you've been brought up with, family, friends that you've grown up with, who don't necessarily share your values and who, you might love, but might not necessarily be on the same page as you. And it's been kind of revolutionary for myself to realize that it doesn't have to be, history. Yes, that means something, but it doesn't really, in terms of community, in terms of meeting people like, that I've had the pleasure of meeting through like Gurls Talk, like they're far more my community than sometimes someone that I've known like my whole entire life. Amika, what did you feel that like, in terms of like finding your community, was that something you found through Free Periods?
Definitely. I kind of started it, when I was 17, and I kind of felt very isolated as an individual. I read about the issue of period poverty in the news, and I kind of thought, I'm really angry about this. And it was quite an isolating feeling to see politicians ignoring it and people with political power just kind of dismissing it and not really talking about it. So I felt personally very angry and upset by it. But as soon as I posted it online, I just got a complete flood of messages from people, not just in the UK, people who had suffered from period poverty, people who, like me, had never heard of it, people who knew someone who had suffered from it. And there was this real solidarity and definitely a sense of community, of everyone coming together behind this one issue and using our shared political power and social media to just raise our voices. And, it's really sad. I'll never meet the kind of 300,000 people who signed the petition or donated to the legal campaign or even came to the protest like you, Adwoa. Like, all those people who are standing there in that crowd, I didn't know all of their names, but they were my community and they're all equally important. And I think even though there can be a sense of invisibility in activism, just knowing that you're part of a bigger struggle where people share the same ambition and goals is really reaffirming and powerful.
And, this goes for all of you, and against like kind of the backdrop of everything that's happening right now, how has the pandemic and the widespread protests impacted the communities you work with?
One thing we realised was a lot of people around us, their mental health was deteriorating at a rapid rate. And after years of watching your friends vent online, you get to a point where you just think, Twitter's not a safe space for my people to be sharing their opinions, because that way they're exposing themselves to a whole can of worms. And it was actually after thinking about that and thinking Black people deserve safer spaces to be able to speak with professionals who get them, who understand them, and without actually exposing themselves too much was actually what was needed. but yeah, just watching how people's mental health has deteriorated and how scared and fearful and sometimes alone we have felt throughout this whole time, and just confused about, you know, different kinds of people sticking up for us for the first time. That level of just realization has just been quite heavy.
No, 100%. What about you, Munroe?
Yeah, so as a trans person navigating this pandemic, unfortunately, conservative governments across the world, it seems there's a trend with a pushback against trans rights and trans progress. So a lot of my community work has been really about empowerment and making sure that people within our community are heard, that people are aware that our experience as trans people isn't monolithic. There's lots of different experiences that happen underneath the trans umbrella, especially within the Black and trans intersection, which I obviously experience myself. But as a Black trans woman, we're seeing increasing numbers of Black trans women being murdered, and largely Black trans women that are involved in sex work, whether or not that's by choice or by survival. It's very obvious that Black trans women are not protected. So a lot of my work has been to make sure that people understand that Black Lives Matter has to be inclusive and that that's non-optional. You can't just say straight Black Lives Matter. It needs to be absolutely every single Black life. So that's been mainly my role within the community, but also, you know, just lifting people up and making people feel like every single one of our experiences is valid and important, because it's very easy in this moment to feel like, you know, there's other people that have it 10 times worse than you. But, you know, if we're not speaking about how we feel, then you know, it impacts on us, and we internalize that, and then it obviously impacts on our mental health, and then impacts on society and how we navigate that.
Yeah, because I felt that, you know, with everything that's been going on with the pandemic and then the resurgence of like Black Lives Matter, it was, you know, the amount of people I spoke to, and I'm sure, you know, with the work that you do, Agnes, that you're, you know, at the forefront of like kind of helping people, that a lot of people were feeling like their issues were trivial. And I think that's like a kind of something that works quite closely with mental health, and is definitely something that I've felt in the past, that, you know, there were tons of people that were dealing with things, you know, much worse than myself, and that like my issues and that my pains and everything weren't kind of valid enough, and that I didn't have those spaces where I could, you know, kind of talk freely with it with people who really understood. But you're seeing more so, I mean, it's been amazing to see how the communities are coming together to kind of validate everyone's different experiences, and to learn from them as well. What about you, Amika?
Yeah, I mean, I think as devastating as it is, the pandemic has kind of proven to be a real opportunity for activism and for people to, I don't know, the time at home has definitely given a lot of people the opportunity to reflect on, you know, systemic injustice and inequalities, and definitely recent events have just reinforced that. With period poverty specifically, obviously it was happening to 1 in 10 girls in the UK, and that was something that was in public consciousness. And after free periods was successful, the government started providing free menstrual products in every school and college in England. But then schools and colleges obviously closed for lockdown, and period poverty became a lot worse, and the statistics increased to 1 in 3. People struggling to afford the menstrual products that they need, which was really shocking. But again, because of the kind of intense onslaught of news and everything going on in politics at the moment, it just really didn't, I don't think enough people heard about that, and so there wasn't enough awareness. So we're trying to kind of fight really hard to keep period poverty in the media and in public consciousness. I think it's a really isolating thing to start with, period poverty, and the period stigma and taboo is something that's obviously very oppressive, facet of the patriarchy as well. And I think we're all kind of analysing these things right now because we have the time to sit at home and on social media. But I personally find it difficult because there are so many elements of this fight, and there are so many different injustices and inequalities. And the thing that I'm noticing right now in activism is that all these different things are being called the same thing. They're all being recognised as part of the problem, from the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Dominique Fells to Grenfell and the climate crisis. Like, this is all one system. It's all one, historic injustice. They're not isolated individuals or incidents. And so that's what I find really inspiring. And I remember reading at the beginning of lockdown a article by Arundhati Roy about the pandemic as a portal, as in we can either choose to use this pandemic as an opportunity to build a new world and create new systems, or we can kind of drag the carcasses of the old systems into the new. And I think increasingly we're seeing like a real energy and optimism, particularly from young people, to want to carve out those new systems, which I find really inspiring.
No, definitely. It's like, things have got to change. That feels like a very kind of trivial way of putting it, to be quite honest, but it's like, yeah, it definitely feels like for a lot of people that they were ready for the new in many ways. Munroe, this question's for you, and one of the many reasons I love your work is that it's very much led by what the community needs. You've always been at the forefront of kind of both educating a wider audience, but really putting your community first, and being very forthright and authentic about the responsibility that kind of holds. What kind of responsibility do you feel toward your community, and how does that inform your work?
Hey, I've got a dog here.
Yeah, love the dog.
So for me, community is everything for me. Without community, I wouldn't have found the empowerment that allowed me to understand my own experience, that allowed me to pass on that empowerment to other people. Just seeing other people send me letters or messages about how I've helped them understand what they're experiencing. I think that, we're essentially sold a lie that there's only two genders, that, white supremacy, that if you're born white, then there's a like unspoken thing that, you're the norm, that you're essentially, the standard human being. But we need to, share difference and celebrate difference. So for me, my community has allowed me a sense of empowerment, but also a sense of purpose, I feel. I think everybody should leave this world better than they found it. And my community allows me to do that.
Agnes, there is a big push to defund the police and invest more in Black communities. And we've seen countless amounts of people who really don't understand what that really means. And I thought who better to explain to a wider audience, what does it actually mean to invest in Black communities? What does that look like?
Redistributing wealth. That's exactly what we're doing in 2020. We are eating the rich. And we are giving it back to the Black community. There are so many projects and so many areas in the Black community that could really do with being improved on. And when you watch public funds be wasted on things like the police when they're not actually doing their job properly, it can get like rather infuriating. And that's where we started with the whole defund the police. But in terms of investing in the community, this could be things like educational purposes, mental health, employment opportunities. The LGBTQIA community, they need it the most right now. just there's so many different avenues where investment is really needed, and this could be from like a crowdfunding level to, you know, changing government policies to allow the projects to really be carried out to completion. We really need to be bridging that gap of inequality that obviously has existed for decades amongst white and black people, and we just, yeah, that's really what investing in the community is.
And can you tell us a little bit about Black Minds Matter and what kind of your part to play in that is?
Yes. So I'm the founder of Black Minds Matter, and Black Minds Matter was created with the mission of connecting as many Black people in the UK, and this is all Black people in the UK, with certified Black therapists for quality therapy sessions. At the moment, we can only fund about 12 weeks of therapy per person. We're hoping this will inspire our community to really get out there and start, you know, thinking about counselling, thinking about finding healthier ways to deal with the different things that we go through. And the most important thing for us moving forward is really just addressing the stigma surrounding mental illness in our community. The way we use certain words like psycho, crazy, the way we describe people can really affect how, you know, someone's willingness to actually go out there and seek help. And another important thing is just encouraging people to seek out treatment during the early stages of an illness, instead of waiting until you get to things like psychosis or schizophrenia. When you look at the figures for both of those, it's quite alarming.
Yeah. And Amika, how did you find your voice as an activist at such a young age? I know we've spoken about this before, but it still is amazingly inspiring. To what extent has your community shaped your voice?
Oh, it's so hard. I mean, yeah, when I think back to that time, I don't think I defined myself as an activist when I was 17. I kind of just, I saw this one issue that really angered me of period poverty, and I just thought I'd kind of do something about it. And I was obviously hugely positively surprised when everyone supported me, and I felt that real sense of community in all these people feeling just as angry as I did and coming together against this same issue that made me so enraged. I think as young people, we're just kind of taught almost subconsciously that we're powerless and that we don't have a political voice. We're only given the vote at the kind of very arbitrary age of 18, and kind of told that, you know, through the media, through television, and even, you know, some people on social media seem to think that, you know, young people aren't really politically engaged. We don't really care about politics or what's going on in the House of Commons. But I think the reason that conversation and that discourse is so wrong is because the politics that I see when I look at Westminster and people like Boris Johnson, their politics is so distant and so different to the politics that we identify with. The kind of issues that we care about are just different and seem a lot more urgent than the issues that they seem to be talking about. And I think that's what's so crucial about activism today, is that we're kind of filling that gap. We're using social media and the internet and our own resources to tackle issues, you know, like mental health in marginalised communities or representation for trans people. The government aren't doing that, and traditional politicians just aren't amplifying those voices. So we're amplifying our own, and that's why I kind of think there's no choice now but to use your voice. If you see an injustice, there's no point waiting for change because it's not coming. And the people with traditional political power, they don't look like us. They don't care about the things we do. And they're also a lot older than us. And so they don't have the same outlook that we do. And we need to use that as an advantage. The fact that we're, you know, people of colour or people from marginalised communities or Black people or women, or I just think we need to use that as power rather than kind of the things that make us silent.
Yeah. And have you felt, I know,
Yeah.
I could just see in the corner of my eyes, all three of us going, yeah. I mean, what was my question? My question was like, have you, I mean, I know you're at uni now, but like, how have you felt, you know, with your friends and everything? And maybe this is a question for all of you. and your kind of like more inner communities, like how have they felt? What have the conversations been like how are people kind of feeling towards everything? What's the energy like? Because I've had like a mixed bunch, to be quite honest, so I'd just like be interested to hear from all of you, like kind of if there's an overwhelming energy of like we need to, of what you literally just said, Amika, or if you've kind of felt that this has drawn you kind of further away from like friends and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had mixed conversations as well. I think one thing I've noticed is that because things seemed so intensely urgent, it was like you couldn't really just FaceTime a friend and talk about what you had for breakfast. Like these things were so much more important. And I've never really seen that before. I think especially around the time of George Floyd's murder, and when people were using words, a lot of my friends who probably have never used words like white supremacy or racism before, or definitely wouldn't kind of talk about their own complicity or their own microaggressions in the past, they felt this kind of urgency and need to talk about it right now. And with everything that happened, and I don't want to say happened because I really like to think it's still kind of ongoing and happening and continuing, but the kind of few days, especially when social media was just a completely different place to what I've seen in the past, with people who definitely don't talk about these issues normally really engaging in them in a meaningful way. I think we proved in that moment that social media and the internet have the power to transform the conversation and transform people's minds. And the fact that it did that, we showed that there was the possibility of change. So that's why I'm trying not to feel too despondent that that's kind of died down, because I don't think it has, and I don't think it should. I think that energy, it just showed us a possibility that it could happen and it needs to continue happening. And there was so much change that came in that time. And I think a lot of it also did happen offline and in, around the dinner table and having conversations with family and friends about, even things that seem like really minor or in the past or distant from ourselves. I think, like I was saying before about everything being connected, there was just this real, just like a new energy to the conversation and a new urgency. And I think that's what needs to continue.
Yeah. What about you, Munroe?
I think over my career as an activist, I've definitely seen attitudes change from, say, even 3 years ago when I was having conversations in the media about white privilege and white supremacy. It almost seemed like something that people have never heard of before in a lot of spaces. And there was quite almost a violent reaction with regards to that, and like shooting the messenger kind of thing. But then, cut to 3 years in the future, and what I was saying, when what a lot of people within activism were saying, within our echo chamber, I guess, we've seen a lot of conversations break out of the echo chamber and break out of the community into the wider public consciousness. Now, we're all, not all of us, but a lot of us are on the same page about this country is largely built on white supremacist values. That's just a fact, and it's a really unfortunate fact. But that we need to acknowledge that truth to get to the future and to get to an inclusive future.
And because you've seen, you've been speaking about this for so long, and like you rightly said, have as often, probably far too many times felt like you have been, like the messenger has been shot, and but you've seen the kind of changes, and you've seen the changes in people and corporations. What does that, I'm just interested to know what your thought process is in regards to your the space that you create in order to continue those conversations with maybe the people that have not understood in the past, the energy that you beautifully create in order to kind of carry on those conversations, maybe to get to a place of like a middle ground, not necessarily like forgiveness, but understanding? I don't know what it is, but I think you do it in such an amazing way. And I'm just wondering what kind of process you personally have to go to in order to like continue those conversations with people who have so not understood in the past.
I mean, I try not to take it personally, as easy as that sounds. It's not easy, but you need to realize that if you're an activist, you need to realize that it's not necessarily about you personally. This is a wider issue, and there's cause and effect. And if you acknowledge that, these people are acting in this volatile way when you're presenting a truth that is the truth, but isn't their truth, they've entangled their identity into largely a lie, even though it's their truth. It's a lie. We're not separate races. Race has been manufactured. Yes, we all look different and races have formed, but that has been intentionally put there in order to uphold power. So I think all of it really comes down to is education and knowing your shit, really. Because if you know your shit, then you can't be swayed. You don't really necessarily think it's about you. You can plug into your community. If you're plugged into the most oppressed people within your community, then you are working from a place of progress rather than ego. If you're an activist and you're working from a place of ego, and say like a politician, and when you're attacked, you're not thinking about the most marginalized people within your community. You're thinking about upholding your party image or upholding your personal image. I don't care what people say about me, because I'm doing this for Black trans women. I'm doing this for Black disabled trans women. I'm doing this for Black trans women that are navigating poverty. So, it's also about acknowledging your privilege. For a Black trans woman within the UK, I'm extremely privileged now. And I've worked my way up to that point. But the fact is that I navigate very privileged spaces, and my income is different to, the standard Black trans woman. And I've been in that position as well. So I think it's about, shooting from a place of progress, keeping your ego in check, recognizing that everything has to come back to community. You need to be making sure that everything that you say is inclusive, diverse, and understanding, and it brings people in. And also, there's a lot of conversations about cancel culture going on right now, and people not necessarily understanding what constitutes as cancel culture. Some people thinking that accountability is cancel culture. Largely, I think that we need to be holding space for people to grow, for people to acknowledge their mistakes and own up and, do better, rather than just cutting people off. Because I think once upon a time, we've all been that person that's got it wrong. We've all been that person that's, made someone else's life harder. So I think, we need to be we need to be bringing people in, but also recognizing that, that there is a limit, and you need to be willing to do better, not be expecting other people to make you better.
Yeah. And Agnes, you are driving the conversation in regards to mental health and mental health in the Black community. How have you felt, how have you seen actually, like has it kind of amplified the conversation in regards to people who weren't necessarily aware of like mental health? Are you seeing what positives are you seeing in making this, shining a light on the importance of mental health in the Black community?
I think the most amazing thing about this whole situation is, although people think Black people's mental health is directly related to racial trauma only, people are realizing that Black people are fully formed human beings who also go through different different issues and different struggles that do affect their mental health. So people are paying more attention to other things apart from things that are directly, in relation to race. Things like employment rates, things like homelessness, things like cultural differences that have really oppressed us for years. And people are actually realizing that there is more to Black people than just racial trauma. We are fully formed human beings, and we do have other struggles that we need help navigating through, and we need safer spaces. We need more investment in our health. We need more acknowledgement from our communities, from the government, from people who we surround ourselves with all the time. Like for me personally, I haven't had, in like the 20 years that I've lived abroad, I haven't had a white person acknowledge my struggles until recently. And I just needed that validation to say, those microaggressions, you weren't making that up in your head. You weren't being dramatic. Those microaggressions have also affected you in so many different ways. And just having that acknowledgement and having people take an interest in you past that race issue is so important. And yeah, it's just a great step for people really starting to invest their time and energy and money into really improving the well-being of Black people in general.
And for our Vogue readers who are watching this segment, how does one go about finding a community with shared values and experiences?
I think, go towards where you feel included, go towards where you feel seen. There's so many different kinds of community, and communities changing all the time. There's communities that I just don't relate to and that I have never even thought of. Like the YouTuber community is something that I've never been involved in, but so many people feel seen with that. The gaming community, my brother's a huge gamer. I don't play computer games. I wouldn't know where to start, but like he feels seen there. So it's community comes in so many different forms, but I think it really materializes when you go towards where you feel seen, heard, believed, understood, encouraged. And, it's sometimes where you can go for the answers. When I first started transitioning, there was no trans community, we were really pitted against each other. It was very much trans women transitioned akin to male attention, and masculinity became somewhat a gauge for your transition. If you had male attention, then that, we internalized the patriarchy in a way that made us feel like our transition was going well if a man was interested in us. And, it's only really until recently that we've all started talking about that and being like, how mad was that we, thought that we needed a man to be seen and understood and validated. But then that's not too different to what cisgender women have experienced in terms of marriage, in terms of being not seen as a spinster. If you're with a man, then you're a successful woman. And, society progresses. But I think if we all speak about our experiences, then we realize that we've actually got more in common than we've got more not in common. So yeah, I just think keep speaking, keep listening to people. Listening is as important as speaking. And, don't just gravitate towards communities that are like you. Make sure that you're plugged into communities that aren't like you, because as important as similarities are, differences are also massively important, especially in this time when we need to be showing up for each other as much as people within our own communities.
Thank you, Munroe. Agnes?
Just to touch on what Munroe said, it's really important to firstly understand what you stand for and what you don't stand for, because it's so easy to get sucked into a community, not, just based on mutual, common interests, without actually taking into consideration whether they actually have the same values as you. So the first step is really just understanding what you are passionate about, what you stand for, and what you will not stand for. And then get out there, put yourself out there, communicate with people. Social media is such an amazing place to really find that community and just make yourself a little bit more vulnerable, because that way people will come towards you. I only started building my community when I felt comfortable to talk about issues surrounding race. And I didn't realize there were so many people where I was living that were feeling exactly the way I was. And if I hadn't spoken up about these things, I probably would have continued to feel alone. So yeah, just put yourself out there and don't be scared. And yeah, basically know what you stand for, what you don't stand for.
Thank you. And Amika?
I completely agree with that. I think community is definitely there if you look for it. So the first step has to be kind of, just because I think everyone has it in them, but this need to feel this sense of belonging with people who share your values and who want to see change as much as you do. And I think especially right now in the activist community, there is, even though we're kind of isolated in our homes, there's such a sense of global solidarity with everyone going through similar emotions, obviously around different issues, but people want to see change as much as each other. So if you see an injustice, if you see some kind of inequality and you want to do something about it, I guarantee you won't be the only one who wants to see that change. So the internet has obviously hugely democratized the conversation and has helped to really redistribute influence and privilege in a way that we haven't seen before, that people who traditionally wouldn't have been heard are now being, we now have, our phones are like microphones. We can speak to everybody, whoever you are. And I think if you look for the people who are going to be on your side and support you, who probably have different resources and friends and different access to different communities, that's how you amplify a message. And I really agree with what Munroe said about kind of embracing difference and making sure that your community isn't just people who have the same experience as you, because you need to be acknowledging and amplifying marginalized communities and people who don't have the same privileges that you do.
Yeah. And last but not least, for those that may be part of a community already, how can they show up in a better way for their community and their community members? I mean, you've all kind of touched on it, but
I think just taking the time to educate yourself.
Yeah.
I think so many people don't say anything because they're really scared of saying the wrong thing. And I can sympathize with that. I'm not massively, there's a lot of anti-Semitism going on right now, a lot of Islamophobia going on right now, a lot of ableism going on right now. And they're three things that I don't experience personally. So that's a privilege to not experience that. So I need to utilize that privilege in a way that allows people to recognize that, people that don't experience these things aren't standing for it, and we're standing with those communities in the fight to make sure that they don't happen in the future. But that, in order to do that, you need to be, taking the initiative to educate yourself and not relying on people to educate you personally. Take heed of the ample resources that are on social media. Do your reading. Not enough people read. It's so important. There's so many, young, if you're a young person, I'm not assuming that everybody's young that's watching this, but especially young people, there's so many people that are offering a perspective that, young people's voices haven't been respected within, literature up until, very recently. We're seeing so many young activists sharing their perspectives on, what it's like to be a young Jewish person in British society, or what it's like to be, a person with a disability on social media, and, all of these new intersections that haven't necessarily been picked up in the past. So it's exciting as well. Get excited about learning new things. Don't see it as daunting. I mean, even I do get daunted, like speaking about, anti-Semitism, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. I want to make sure that I'm there and, waving the flag for everybody that experiences anti-Semitism. But you can't stop you can't not say anything because you're scared of saying the wrong thing. That's the worst thing. And I need to just keep thinking about, you know, this is how white people must feel when, you know, speaking up against racism. They're scared of saying the wrong thing, but you can't not say anything because you're scared of saying the wrong thing.
Yeah. Agnes?
I think just not being afraid to encourage your community to be distracted. I know right now we've obviously been going through this whole Black Lives Matter movement, but just encouraging your community that there are other things going on in terms of like Jewish people and just anti-Semitism, and just encouraging them to take their time, like Munroe said, to educate themselves, not being afraid to say, you know, guys, listen, I know we've got our own stuff going on, but we still need to be paying attention and sticking up for other people as well. Otherwise, our message is dumbed down. If we're not actually sticking up for those, what are we saying? What message are we sending out to white people? What message are we sending out to them? We're basically making it acceptable to go around just spewing hate just because we can't take time out of our day to stick up for other marginalised brothers and sisters. So yeah, just don't be afraid to distract your community for 2 seconds and just remind them that there's still a lot more work that needs to be done outside our community.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think I was going to say what Munroe said about education. I think I'm really passionate about the kind of, especially in the UK, the curriculum is so skewed, especially that I study history at university, and it's embarrassing how little I was taught at school about the reality of empire and colonialism and the complete like erasure of Black contribution to this country. There was some research that was done recently that found that the most popular exam board, EdXL, had absolutely no reference in most of its modules to Black people's contribution to empire, to Britain, and there was no reference to empire in so many modules. And I just think, obviously, so many people, if they're not informed, they're going to hold these embedded racism and embedded ignorance and bias, and that's going to trickle down into all of, you know, into companies, into workplaces, into, you know, into all of our communities, if there's not that kind of base level of education on the, you know, kind of quite ugly reality of this country's national past and history. And so now I think we're realizing that it's up to us as individuals to fill that gap and do our own reading, do our own education, and kind of ignorance isn't going to get us anywhere. But then the other thing I was going to say about showing up is that you've got to show up and you've got to say something, and you've got to be passionate and enthusiastic, but you also have to look after yourself, because activism is hugely draining and emotionally exhausting, and it can also be really difficult to kind of persist when you're repeatedly saying the same thing and advocating for a cause, but the people just don't want to listen to you, or they are in denial, or they refuse to engage in a conversation that just feels like the most important thing in the world to you personally. So I think, yeah, looking after your own mental health and that of your community as well, and making sure that you're, you know, not overdoing it in terms of kind of the strain on your own personal life is also really important.
Can I just amplify what Amika said as well about all of these issues that we're seeing happen around the world? You know, they're all linked. They're not separate issues. We can't see them as separate issues, you know, and ultimately it's oppression. So if one group of people aren't oppressed, then, you know, if, as we've seen with, you know, gay people, especially gay men have access to a privilege that they didn't have, say, in the 1980s during the AIDS epidemic. But, you know, now they've got much more privilege than, say, trans people. So gay people aren't oppressed in the way that they were, but like trans people are now navigating an environment which is very similar to what gay people experienced in the 1980s. So I think it's really important to just, you know, bear in mind that if it's not you, then it could be somebody else. And if it's not them, it could be you. So I think it's really important to just recognize that these are human issues and that we're all human, and that we all should stick up for each other. And if we all stuck up for each other, then we wouldn't experience it in the same way that we do.
Yeah, I was going to add to that as well. I think it is all oppression, but it's also hierarchical oppression. And I think obviously this isn't just, it's not just like white privilege, that it's not an equal oppression between all groups. There are so many marginalized groups, and like for example, I hate the term BAME because it just lumps together all Black and minority communities when the oppression is nowhere near on the same level for me as a non-Black person, but a person of color compared to a Black person. And I think that's one way of really silencing so many people's voices, by lumping together these issues that, yes, they're all there and they're all important, but oppression is a hierarchy, and it's a system that definitely privileges some voices over others.
Yeah, and I think it eats into that idea that we're seeing a lot at the moment, where people aren't necessarily, you know, acknowledging their privilege and the many shapes that it comes in, and the privileges that I have as a Black woman compared to like lots of other Black women around me, the ones, just to amplify what you said, Munroe, about where you've been and where you are now. It's like, it's so important to look at that and bring that into any conversations that you're kind of navigating through, in any communities that you're, working with or for.
Privilege doesn't need to be a bad thing. It's
exactly.
It's power. It just means that you can take more on.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I do not have the same experience as a Black woman, as a dark-skinned Black woman. I don't experience
another conversation.
I benefit from colorism in ways that, I need to call out. I need to make sure that, I'm not, seen as more palatable, or that I'm, that the talents of dark-skinned Black women are seen as less important than my privilege. It's so important, and it just means that I can take on more. Mm-hmm. We need to see activism as a machine, and those with the most privilege can take on much more of the strain. So that's what I want white people to realize as well. We don't want white people to be apologizing for being white. It just means that, other white people are going to listen to you. It means that, speaking about racism sounds very different coming from white people than it does with Black people. So we need allyship. It means that, if you have privilege, that means that you can be an ally. It means that you can, provide relief to people that don't have your privilege. So it's just, again, education and speaking up and making sure that we're all engaging.
Yeah, and I think in regards to speaking up, those conversations that I had when we're not there, I'm seeing that a lot at the moment. It's like, if I'm not in the room and this conversation is going on, and you hear someone saying something that, doesn't sit well with you, or sit well with what you know to be true and what you hold as important, you need to, like, don't come with me with the conversation. Come with me with the fact that you stood up for not only myself, but for all for the community, for the larger issue, because I think it goes back to what you were saying, Munroe, this idea that it has, with the anti-Semitism, it has made me think about my part, what it must feel like for white people, and the fear of saying the wrong thing. And I need to keep that at the forefront of my mind in regards to everything, because it is, and definitely always has been the same issue, but I need to make sure that I'm like, that my voice is loud when it comes to all of it, and not just something that, largely affects myself or people that I really care about, I suppose. Oh, so much. But I'm so grateful to all three of you for taking the time to sit virtually with me and discuss all the ins and outs of community. And I'm very grateful for all the work that you all three do individually, but for the same cause.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was great. Thank you.